Alright, so we left off at the structure of an HTML file. I want to talk really quickly about some tools. Text editor. There are kind of three main text editors. I think for the most part here at Metal Toad we tend to lean towards Sublime Text 2 as our favorite. There's also a Linux version of that.
And a Windows version.
There's a Windows version, huh?
Sublime Text 2 was originally developed for Windows, and then they've ported it to both Mac and Linux as well.
With that said, another disclaimer, we're not going to be supporting Windows in this class. Eventually, I'm going to do a Linux workshop if you want to put Linux on your laptop. All right, so the other text editors, a couple other come to mind. There's Coda, which is a fairly nice one. I think it's Mac only. There's gedit, which is a text editor for Linux. And there's TextMate, which I don't believe has a Linux port. It's just
That's Mac only. And then if you do happen to use Windows, there's also Notepad++. But really, Sublime Text is cross-platform. It's very fast. It kind of comes with everything you need out of the box, more so than the others do, I think. And it's free, but if you want to give the guy $25 because it's a single developer, feel free to give him $25.
definitely.
What was the fourth one again?
The fourth one was TextMate. And just to give you an idea of why you would need a text editor, you know, a lot of people only know of things like Dreamweaver or Publisher or programs like that allow them to create web pages graphically. Unfortunately, you can kind of get yourself into trouble with those programs if you're not exactly sure what's going on behind the scenes. They can be helpful to kind of get a quick glance at a web page, but they may not be accurately showing you everything you need to see. So we tend to stick with text editors, and you'll see these have nice fancy colors. They separate out everything for you, so it's a lot easier to read. Granted, this probably doesn't look very readable to you anyway, but if you were to look at this same page in TextEdit, I mean, it's just it's night and day, and it's a lot trickier to navigate around when you're dealing with these kind of files. I'm gonna go to the same one and just show you what it looks like.
Well, and another good thing about these text editors, these in particular, as opposed to your regular Notepad or, non-code oriented text editors, is these do offer things like code completion and hints and what's it called as you're typing, Dan? And what's the term for
IntelliSense.
that? IntelliSense. So it does offer you this improved environment over a regular text editor. So it's gonna give you hints.
So here you can see text editor, regular, text editor, improved.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a lot better. I used to think this was kind of cheesy and didn't understand why people did it. But then again, I used to not be a very good developer either. So that's kind of a brief talk about text editors, although I did want to mention that there's lots of add-ons that you can get for your text editing that kind of help you improve or even go faster. Let me see if I can give a quick demonstration of that. So I can type M0 and tab, and I have a plugin there that knows that I mean margin 0 when I say that.
Oh, like shortcuts.
Shortcuts, that's definitely one of the major plugins. There's shortcuts that will show you when there's plugins that will show you when you have extra white space in your file, which is just taking up unnecessary memory for no reason. Let's see, there's plugins that can work directly with your source control, whatever you're using. I hope it's Git. Let's see.
And it should be said, at least, and you may disagree with me, but I think when you're first starting out, though, these plugins are great, especially when you're on a project or when you're on even a personal project and you want to do something fast, the plugins save you a lot of time. But I think when you're first starting out, it makes a lot of sense to actually type everything out. That way you get used to, the syntax and the vocabulary that you're going to use in whatever language that you're doing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely agree there. So browser tools, we kind of touched on this last week, but I want to go over them again because it's very important. Here's Dablet. This is a online program that allows you to modify CSS, HTML, and JavaScript kind of all at the same time. So right here, I can just I can add a article with a class of beautiful. Up here, I could create a class, or can you in this one?
You might want to put something in the article so it shows up.
Psh. Fish polish. Giving it a height of 100%, a width of 50 pixels.
Maybe a border.
Ruh-roh. Does do you know if Dablet allows classes?
Yeah, it allows classes. But you didn't close out your initial class. There's no closing curly.
There is no initial class here.
Yep. So.
Yep. All right. So there we see our article that we added, 100%, 50 pixels high, with a solid black border. So this is an online tool that really lets you prototype stuff very quickly and experiment in the browser. You can also do this directly with pretty much any inspector. Oh, I wish we had Tom's site, a really simple one. That was fun. So once you've enabled your dev tools, it's a preference in every browser. You may have to hunt around for it, but once you enable the dev tools, you can inspect elements, and you have the ability to modify properties right there too.
Good with everything?
Mhm.
Okay.
So there is a preference in,
Yes.
Well, if you're in Safari, so if Safari is your browser, you have to actually enable the developer tools in your preferences. If you're in Chrome, by default, they're enabled. I believe under if you look on the far right side, the 3 lines on the toolbar, see that little stack? Can you point out it, Dan?
Oh, what? I'm sorry. This.
Right there, yeah. And then it's under tools, or is it under tools? Yeah, developer tools. So in Chrome, it's enabled by default. In Safari, I believe you have to enable it yourself. And then if you're in Firefox, they have their own set of tools. I don't think you have to enable them. But if you're using Firefox, speaking of tools, if you're using Firefox, there's a plugin called Firebug that I don't know if you talked about this last time, Dan, but
A little bit.
so yeah, Firebug was essentially the very first breath of fresh air that web developers received. It's essentially a tool to inspect and manipulate your web page in the browser, and it was the very first one. Before that, we had horrible tools. It was very difficult to get anything done. But Firebug came along and saved the day. So if you're using Firefox, definitely check out Firebug.
Here's a little plugin for Firefox too that shows the different layers. This can come in handy when you're first getting out and developing for the web. You can really see all the elements that are going into constructing this page. So here we have a title. And you can see down on the bottom it's showing you the H2 tag. It's a header tag. And from there we have the header box containing that, the article that's containing all of that, and so on until we can go all the way up the tree and really get a good grasp of how it's being built. This is a fun tool to play with if you're just getting started in web development. It becomes less and less useful as you start knowing what you're doing, but it's definitely cool to look at.
Yeah, it's sort of a. Did you show them the tree in the developer tools at all, Dan?
I don't think so.
So if you pull, So if you look here to the left, so it looks like code. Actually, I'm not going to confuse you too much with what this is actually a representation of, but essentially this is a tree. It's a hierarchical representation of everything on your web page. And all that graphic he was just showing you is doing is representing this as a 3D model in these different layers. So once you really start thinking about web pages, you actually begin to think about them like this.
Right.
You know, things embedded within things.
So we have a page. It's encompassing everything. We've got a header on there. Within the header, we have a link that contains the image of the toad. Next to that link, we have an H1 that contains a link. And then a fancy skip link, which is actually hidden. You see it's off the screen, 9,999 pixels. This is a skip link for screen readers. They can simply click this and go down to the navigation. We ain't getting off track. So text editor, those are some online tools. Graphics. There is a Linux program called GIMP, which is the closest competitor to Photoshop I think there is. With that said, it's still not Photoshop. If you can get your hands on a copy of Photoshop, that's really one of the major tools you need to have. And as far as expenses go, Photoshop is a big expense for any web developer. Some web developers don't pay that. They either acquire the software through their company that they're working for or somehow find it otherwise. I'm not going to elaborate on that.
You can also do a subscriber scheme now. You can pay.
That's right. They have
$30 a month and get the entire Creative Suite.
How much is it?
I think maybe that's the student discount. It's something like $30 to $50 a month.
So for the people online, somebody mentioned that there's a Creative Suite service now where you can pay something around $30 a month to get the Creative Suite, which is definitely a killer deal. Creative Suite comes with
50 per month for the Creative Cloud for CS6.
50 per month, so the 30 may be a student price.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
For an employee.
Well, there's a lot of students in here. Cool. So with that said, I mean, you kind of got to get Photoshop at some point. I'm going to go ahead and open it and just talk about how we export a graphic for the web. This may seem like a silly thing, but there's actually a lot of stuff to it.
Hello.
Hi, we've been joined by somebody.
Yeah, this is James in Ohio.
Hi, James in Ohio. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we've already gotten started, but we are recording this, so feel free to check the video out when we publish it to see what you missed.
Okay.
All right, Photoshop's open. Let's find a recent file here. Let me find
And while you're looking for that, I'll say, like, so Photoshop is the industry standard. Like, you kind of have to use it if you're working with clients or receiving designs from a designer. To toy around with, you can use things like GIMP, or there are online tools now like Aviary. I mean, if you're doing basic color correction, resizing, transforming of images, like, there are other tools just for, like, to play around with. But once you get into client work and working with designers, you pretty much have to have Photoshop. I've attempted to get away from it at times, and I was always unsuccessful.
I have too. Yeah, I tried to switch to GIMP at one point and just wasn't successful. So I'm not going to go over every single thing I'm doing in this. What I am doing is selecting this logo, and I'm going to hit trim just to, let's isolate this logo here, and I'm going to hit trim just to bring it down. So now I'm left with this logo here. There's actually a special save command, save for web and devices. This presents you with a number of different options. Back when image optimization was really, really important, and I'm not saying it isn't now, you could do things like this where you would put it 4 up. You have your original here. You have a JPEG here at, let's say, 80%. 80-ish. You have another one here at 30, and then you have a final one at 10. And if we zoom in on these a little, you can see the quality difference between 80%, 30%, and 10%. So you could really play with these different values in these different boxes to see which one worked for you best, and then export that. But actually, we've gone pretty much away from JPEGs at this point, and we've moved to PNGs. And the reason we've done that is because you used to have two choices. You had JPEGs or GIFs. JPEGs compress by taking colors that are similar and making them one block. So if we zoom in on this really close, you'll see that it's strips of light colors. So instead of describing each single pixel individually, it would describe, okay, from here to here is this color. So the more compression you add, the worse that would get. They actually call this JPEGing or artifacting. You had a choice between JPEGs, which are great for photographs, or you had a choice between GIFs. And GIFs were great because they gave you a standard index of colors. And the way that compressed is it said, okay, I'm gonna say, this document only has 64 colors. And rather than describing the color for each separate pixel, which could be described in hexadecimal with 6 characters, it uses an index so that each pixel is only represented by 1 or 2 digits. It may be a little tricky to understand the compression with that explanation, but I'm going to go ahead and move on because we don't really use GIFs as much as we used to because of the now supported PNG format. Another reason we would use GIFs often was that GIFs support transparency where JPEGs did not, but they only support one level of transparency, which is to say that it was either off or it was on. So you'll see at the end here, we have these white pixels. If we were to put a black background, let's see. Oh, that would just mat it to black. Maybe we can't do that right here. If we were to put a black background, it would stand out as very jagged because it would have, these white edges around it. With PNGs, we have the ability to go full, you see the 24 there, we have full alpha channels, which means a color can not only have a different mix of red, green, and blue, but it can also have an alpha value, which is how transparent it is. So this is maybe, 30% transparent. This is maybe 15. So you can put this on any background and it will be smooth and look crisp. Not to mention, there's actually file size differences between PNGs and JPEGs that are usually in the PNG's favor. So with that said, that's kind of the basics of exporting an image for use on the web. There's a lot more in that category, but that'll cover it for now.
Do you guys want the light on or off?
I like it off.
That's always easy to see the screen.
Off it is. Tony, since you joined us, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, hello. I'm Tony Rasmussen, the Director of Development here.
And that was Tony Rasmussen, Director of Development for the people online and recording. We have one mic here, so I'm going to be repeating some stuff. And since we're doing introductions, can we get an introduction from you, James?
I'm a Drupal developer in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm independent.
Awesome. Well, we might be running a little slow for you at first. We're starting at the very beginning, but we'll definitely be getting to CMS and Drupal here in the next coming sessions.
No problem.
And it looks like we've got my son Tanner here. Hi, Tanner. All right, I'm throwing you guys back off to the side. All right. So let's see. Did we cover our tools? I believe we've covered most of our tools. Now, these are the basics for creating very, very basic websites. Obviously, there's many, many more tools, and we'll get into those as we kind of get deeper into some of the guts of this stuff. So now we're going to spend probably the majority of the session talking about HTML elements. You may have heard the phrase HTML5 thrown around a lot lately. That's because there's been a new iteration of HTML that's actually getting pretty good support in all the browsers these days. And it's introduced a lot of new elements that previously weren't available to us. One of the cool things about these new elements is they're much more semantic. And what semantic means, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it basically means that it makes logical sense. So instead of just saying, I want a thing here and I want a thing over here, you're saying, I want an article here, I want an aside here, I want a headline here, I want a footer here. So we're just basically going to go down this list and talk about what all of these are and what they're used for. Some of them we might go faster than others because they simply aren't used as much. The A tag. The A stands for anchor, and this is probably one of the most used elements because it's how you make a link to another web page. So basically, there's the main important attribute is the href, and that is essentially the link. So when you copy a link from a website, what I have highlighted up here, if you were creating a link, let's go to our Dablet here and make a link. Oh, did I kill Dablet? Oh, poor Dablet. No, I gotta stop doing that. That's killing.
Have you talked already about how these elements and tags are related and what attributes are? And
No, that's what we're doing right now.
okay. Well, I mean, like the specific components of it.
Nope,
Does,
not yet.
does everyone understand what an attribute on an element is? Okay. I just wanted to cover it because if we're going to name specific attributes of an element, we should probably cover what an attribute actually
Sure.
is.
So we have our tag here, and the attribute is what you see in green here. So different elements have different attributes. Like it wouldn't make sense to have a href on an article because it's not a link. It wouldn't make sense to have a value on a tag. It just wouldn't do anything. So it is kind of important to know which attributes go with which. But basically, the attribute syntax is attribute equals quotes and then whatever's in there. Sometimes these are also referred to as properties, not as often though. So what we did here is we created an anchor tag with an href to html5doctor.com. I'm going to go ahead and add another attribute. I'm going to add a target. What this attribute does is I'm telling this link to open in a blank page. Really, this can be anything. It's a name of a page. The convention is to use blank. So now when we click on this, it opens a new window with that link. You also see that this has a pound and a D after it. What that means is that link on that page has a name of D. And what that means is you're actually specifying that this link here is an anchor on that page, which is where the A actually came from. So instead of just linking just to a page at the top of the page, you can actually link to the middle of a page here. So if we inspect this, we'll find an A tag with the name of D. Right there. ID of D. Where's that A tag? Are you going straight to the ID? Anyway, it's in there. Trust me.
If there was already an ID of D, it's going to go to the
Yeah.
first one.
All right, so that's an A tag. Very important. We're going to go ahead and go back to the beginning. Some of these we're going to gloss over a little because you probably won't be using much and they may be pretty self-explanatory. Abbreviation, it's pretty straightforward. You specify what the abbreviation stands for in the actual code. So they have an abbreviation here with a title that describes what the abbreviation is, and then they have the abbreviation inside the tag. And you'll notice if I roll over this abbreviation, eventually it's going to pop up and give me a tooltip. Defining term. So that's what the title of that abbreviation is for that link text. Address. This is one of those semantic things. Basically, it's meant to hold an address. You might wonder why you would want a specific tag for address. It's entirely possible in the future that mobile devices would recognize the address tag and turn it into a link that would then link to the mapping application for that mobile device. So that's why you'd want to, be sure to use address when there is an address. Area, we're going to skip over because it's actually kind of out of use at this point. Article is pretty self-explanatory. This is one of those things that's simply a semantic way to designate what's in it. So instead of just having a page with lots of paragraphs on it, you can actually have separate designations of articles. It looks like somebody chatted me here. I'm going to take a quick look at that. Nope, not sure where the sound's coming from. All right. Aside. This is a similar semantic element to article. And aside is something you might see on other web pages. Let's bring one up here. CNN.com. Hopefully they haven't changed their design and made this bad. So if we go to an article, picking these at random, you might see on the side a social media. It would be very logical to mark this up with an aside. It's something that's related, but not part of the primary content. You see they have something called sidebar here. And this is what you see with old HTML. Div, span, div, 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 div. That's all fine for creating something. It doesn't tell us much about what's in the content. So we're actually, with HTML5, we're replacing these divs with things that mean a lot more, like address, article, aside. So from now on, I'll likely just point out when there's a semantic element, because really all that's doing is making the code a lot easier to read, but really they act and function the same. Audio. This one's very new and may actually still change. You'll see over here that OGG supported in some browsers, MP3 in some, Wave in all of them. Essentially, audio is a way to include audio on your site. It's pretty self-explanatory. We're not going to go into the specifics of the syntax for that because it's entirely possible that it could change. The B tag. B stands for bold. At one point, this was deprecated in favor of the strong element. But since then, the web's kind of reversed, and they've decided that B is, it's one character instead of 5, so why not keep using it? Not to mention it was already in use in millions of web pages. Base element. Let's see, let's read this one together. Some of these are going to be new to me. Base element allows authors to specify the document base URL for the purposes of resolving relative URLs. Oh, that's interesting.
It's a hardly used element. I mean, you might find it in, really, like, it was one of those things that was created with good purpose but was never actually used in the wild. I don't know if I've ever seen a website that used a base element.
Right, exactly. These BDIs, BDO, this is for right-to-left languages or vertical languages. I can't say I have a lot of experience developing those types of sites, but this would essentially allow you to have one bidirectional set, so it'd either be a right-to-left site. Wait, you guys are looking at me right to left. Or it could be a left to right or vertical, whatever. These would allow you to override that for specific items. Block quote. This is kind of something that's come from the print world. Often in print, you'll see paragraphs of text followed by an indented block of text that is used for essentially quotes. Can you think of a good place where you know what block quote is at?
I mean, you see them a lot in blog posts where an author is quoting another author, even paraphrasing. It doesn't have to be a full quote. They get misused fairly often. People will put things like code in a block quote or things like that. I mean, really, like it means what it says. It's a block that has a quote in it. So if you're quoting someone else, that's what you do. But it's a significant quote. You wouldn't use a block quote for, say, 10 paragraphs of quote from someone else. You would use it for a significant piece that stands out, like you would in a textbook or anything that has that one piece. Again, think of there are a lot of crossovers between the print world and the HTML world. A lot of these concepts were taken because when the web first started, people thought of it as just a subset of maybe the print world, but it's moved on from that. So think of block quotes as tiny quotes, small quotes.
Sure. So body, if you remember the first class, we talked about the elements, the basic elements of a web page. Body is one of the main elements. Every web page you see has a body, and in it is contained all of the content. The BR tag, this is a line break element. This is what you would use to, normally when you see two paragraphs, they're separated by a blank space. A line break simply breaks it to the next line without the breaking space. Pretty fairly well-known print thing, I think.
Usually inserting a line. Yeah, it's another holdover from the print world.
Yep. So button, let's see, can anybody guess what this is used for? I won't go into specifics of this, but essentially when you need a button, you can use a button class. Sorry, button element. Canvas. Canvas is a big addition to HTML5. What it actually allows people to do is essentially do vector graphics within HTML natively. This is what people talk about when they talk about HTML5 killing Flash.
Well, I was to say it's also beyond just bitmap, just vector. A canvas can literally be thought of as a canvas. Like, you can put anything in it. You can put text, you can put animations, you can put bitmaps, vector graphics, just absolutely anything you can think of can be rendered to a canvas. Beginning though, you will probably not spend much time with Canvas. It is a sort of an advanced feature of browsers that in your everyday website doesn't get utilized very often. But for very, very advanced applications, this is sort of very exciting to us. This is something we've waited for in browsers for a long time.
You'd be able to embed movies and
You can embed
animations and
exactly, and you can embed things even from the camera on your computer now. You can, yeah. So this is.
So right now I'm playing Pong with my scroll bar.
Yeah.
Using Canvas. So, I win. Ha. So there's definitely a lot of things that you can accomplish with Canvas, much larger than this class will cover. So let's see. 1 second. Tanner, you have a question? Can you chat it?
You can't hear me? Yeah, sure.
I'd prefer you chat it.
Oh, okay, got it.
The caption element. This is pretty straightforward. This is when you need a caption for an image. You know, before we just have a random div sitting next to a paragraph, and if you were looking in the code, you had no idea, or sitting next to an image, you would have no idea that that was associated with an image. Now it's pretty straightforward. Site, same thing. This is another semantic element. Simply, just like you would, like the italicization rules around titles, you would use site around your titles to designate them as such. Code is very similar. Code essentially, you use code if you want to display code on your web page, not just have that code interpreted. So let me see if I can explain what I mean by that.
Would somebody put code on there if they said, if you would like to have a link to this page, use this piece of code in your web page?
Yeah, so you're talking about when you
Kind of.
If you want to embed something in your blog or...
when someone so those are not always inside code tags. Sometimes those are actually inside input tags. You see both, and there are reasons to do both. Code is really more for representing code. Like, if we were giving code examples from this class on a blog post, the code examples we're giving would be in a code tag, just as a representation, not necessarily something for you to copy and take with you.
Okay, so Tanner asked a question, is HTML5 like how HTML is read by our computers or like the rules of HTML coding? It is syntaxed. 5 is simply the version number.
Yeah, so like you would have Windows or Internet Explorer 6, Internet Explorer 7, Internet Explorer 8. HTML5 is just the newest version of it. Everything has a number after it. Everything has a version. That's all it means.
Yep. All right.
But they take HTML develops over a long period of time.
HTML develops over a very, very long period of time. The HTML5 spec, they've actually just declared it complete. I don't think that's true. I think they will continue to call new things HTML5 for a while. There will not be an HTML6 next year. But yeah, they call it 5 because it's catchy and it's something for you to, with all these new things that have come out, it's something for us as web developers to say, this is something new, we call it HTML5, even though it's actually just HTML.
Is there a certifying agency?
It's called the W3C.
Okay.
Yeah, the World Wide Web Consortium, I think is what that stands for. And they are a big group that makes, it's open source too, you can actually contribute to it. So when you get to the point where you feel comfortable, not just code, but you can contribute opinions. They have a lot of newsletters and things you can subscribe to. They're very verbose, you will get thousands of messages a day if you subscribe to them. But yeah, W3C. And within that, that's subdivided into lots of other groups, so you can specialize in whatever you're interested in.
Right. All right, let's go back to our list here. All right, call is kind of a throwback. It stands for column. Once upon a time, we used to lay out all of our web pages using tables. It would be, a table is simply a rectangle with rows and columns. So we would, right, exactly, a spreadsheet. We would lay out all of our information using that kind of grid system. Obviously, that didn't work well for flexibility reasons, so we obviously moved away from that. But column was a way to either style or add properties to a column in a table. Column group was simply a wrapper around those column items. Command element. Is that a new one?
No, that's a throwback. It's essentially it's another one of those not very seen elements. You don't see them in the wild very often. I mean, essentially you would use code and not command. There's really no reason to use command. A lot of these things have lingered on and on, but command's not one I would worry about.
Right.
Data list is a new one.
Yes. Data list is a new one.
So it's essentially just the same as a select box, like a drop down. So if you've ever dropped something that, you click on an input and it drops down, like you can select the month or day you were born or whatever. A data list is a way of representing that in a way that allows you to sort it or search it as your, like say it's a list of like 10,000 things. You want to be able to sort it, and that's what data list is going to give you the opportunity to do. It's not actually supported by all browsers yet, so this isn't one you'd want to use in like a serious project. It's just something that in the future will be great to use.
Yeah, and some of these are really kind of only for use in the future. So in the interest of time, we may actually go past some of them, just kind of gloss over them. DD stands for
It's a definition.
definition descriptions. So you can have a definition list, which is DL. It'll be down here. These are in alphabetical order. You can have a definition list that you then have a definition item and a definition description. So essentially, it would show a list that shows a definition item and then the definition description.
A list of things that are related, so one thing describes the other thing, is
Right.
what that represents.
So the Dell document, basically, it was intended to be like a strike-through type of element. Doesn't get a lot of use at all. Details element is, I think this is a new one.
Yeah, and it's not widely used yet. It's so it's supposed to encompass summaries and citations and things like that that are referencing something else on the page. So this is getting closer to semantics. You want to describe things on your page using the elements that you lay them out in, rather than having to describe them with classes and IDs. I think you've gone over classes and IDs before. Oh, you're gonna skip past our favorite one.
DFN?
No,
I'm
DFN.
not skipping div, but DFM is not used.
DFN is not used. Div is probably the most widely used element on the internet, other than an anchor tag.
Really? I'd argue there's more divs.
There probably is more divs, but
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. When they first came out, they were awesome. We could put divs wherever we wanted. We weren't confined to a grid system. They could be floating. They could be positioned relative to where you are on the screen. There's a lot of great reasons we moved to divs for layout. Unfortunately, it left us with the problem you saw where we have code that looks like div. Oh, hey, we've got
this
some.
page isn't probably going to suffer from it too much.
This page is actually using HTML5. So you see they have article, they have an aside, the glossary, they have a navigation element, and they have different sections. Really great example of how to use HTML5.
Yeah, so the div is, it doesn't mean anything. I think people used to call it a divider or a division, but really it's just a catch-all. You would put, if it wasn't a paragraph or a header or any one of the other tags that used to exist, you just throw it in a div because it means nothing. But you would use it to have a target for other things you were doing on the page. So it's essentially a bucket that you target later on. With HTML5, we get these other semantic elements, and that's what you want to use when you can. But divs are still fine if there's not a semantic tag that covers what you're trying to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked about these DL and DT. Those are for the definition lists. Doctype is something we talked about in the first class, and I think we went pretty in depth in that, so I'm going to leave that one alone for now. M simply stands for emphasis. This would essentially turn whatever's in the M tag italic. Embed is how we traditionally get stuff that isn't normal web content into a web page. Things like Flash, things like movies. This is how we would embed audio before we had an audio tag. So embed's kind of like the div of the media world. It was the catch-all that basically said, I'm doing something funky here. There was attributes that would say, they would point to how that certain embed tag was used. It would point to a program on another server that would figure stuff out. Hopefully, you guys will maybe never use an embed tag. I hope not.
Yeah, so with modern browsers, you get tags such as audio and video, and really video is the key. Like, you might still use the embed tag eventually, but now that we're getting smarter browsers, we can use video and audio to embed that stuff.
I've seen embed as a element identifier for like a Google Calendar or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. There are other ways of doing that. I could imagine some use case for that, but most likely, unless you're embedding Flash, that's really the only time I've ever used an embed, like in a serious website.
So if I could talk to that a little bit, there's essentially a, there's an element called embed, and then there's the action of embedding something. So you'll often see links that say embed this on your site, but when you click the embed and copy the code, it doesn't have an embed tag in it. It has something like a JavaScript tag or a URL or something that gets interpreted. It's usually not an embed tag. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
But it has the word embed in the code.
Correct. No, I'm sorry. It does not have the word
Does not have
embed
the
in the
word
code.
Yeah, so it has two meanings.
Embed on YouTube basically says to do the embed action, copy this code. The code will not contain any actual embed code. Embed's really a legacy element. So field set. Field set is a way to kind of divide things on, it's usually used in forms. I added a field set to our dablet here, and it essentially added a little border around this. You can go a little farther and add a label, put a property. Nope, it's a element. So there's our label to our field set. One thing that happens with field sets a lot is people will make them collapsible. So you'll have a label that says, fruits. And when you clicked on fruits, it would expand and show you the list of fruits. So field set is kind of a common way to group things, usually in the form setting, but I've seen it used elsewhere. All right. Where'd my thing go? Hold on 1 minute. I gotta do it without pulling up this Google Hangout because it crashes everything. Fig caption. Captions for figures. Figure essentially is something that could either be a graph, it could be an image, really it could be text if that's what you're calling out. Think of a textbook when they refer to a figure. Footer's pretty straightforward. Tells you you're in a footer. Form, also straightforward. A form tag encompasses all the different tags that make up any form that you're looking at. This commonly has an action attribute, and the action tells it where to go. So let's go to the Metal Toad contact form. Oh my gosh, it's right there. If we inspect this, we'll find a form tag. Right here. And the action is contact. So basically what that says is it says take whatever input they put in this page and send it to the contact page. And whatever is in the action will do stuff with the input that was there.
Yeah, I mean, essentially forms are the basic way of gathering data from people that are visiting your site.
Right. Even a search box will have a form element around it. So H1 through H6, these are essentially header elements, header titles. Let me bring up a page here. So this is a page we developed recently for a client, and it shows all of the different basic HTML items, along with some special things we did for them. It shows what a table looks like on their site. It shows what all the different headings represent. So basically, these just give you, just like Word, different styles of headings to differentiate your content. It's generally, I'm going to say it's always best practice to have one heading one on your page. This says, I'm the title of this page. Everything else, section headlines, you can delineate as far as you want. Some other basic stuff that's on here, we see stuff like there's an underline tag. Here's what a citation does. Here's a subscript and a superscript. We have emphasized here. This is struct text. This is inserted text. Now you'll see that this is yellow and stricken through. With CSS, we could actually go back and change what that actually means. We could say all inserted text has a background of green and it's bolded text. We could do that in the CSS and affect every one of those insert elements. We'll get into more of that next week. Here's a definition list. We have a list title, definition list, definition. And here's an ordered list. Pretty straightforward. List item 1, 2, nested lists. You can actually control how these are listed out, whether they use numbers, capital letters. You can even use Roman numerals. Unordered lists are straightforward bullet points. You can also control what your bullets look like. With CSS, you can even go as far as to add little images there if you want. We talked about table. Here's that code. See, the code element has some style on it in this instant that makes it look more, it uses a monospace font so that it looks more machine-like, so that it really stands out as a piece of code. Like, you can tell that this looks different simply because it's in a code block. And here's an example of a good block quote. Quote from Hal. Okay, so those were some basic items. Now maybe I can skip a few of those. Head. Head is the one of the 3 tags needed for any web page. You need the HTML tag, you need a head tag, and you need a body tag. Head contains kind of what I like to think of the brains of your web page. Header. Header is pretty straightforward. It's a semantic element that tells you you're in a header. You can have a header for your page. You can have a header for an article. You could have a subsection of that article and an aside that has its own little header. It's really only to make it simplified for reading the code. H group, not really used. HR, this is a horizontal rule. Essentially, it creates a line between 2 pieces of content. And, you can style that line however you want. HTML, that's one of those 3 basic ones that wraps everything. The I tag is for italic. Iframe. Iframes are kind of devilish to developers. Iframes allow you to embed another web page into your web page. So that can be kind of handy if you're doing something like you want to include a Google map. Google will actually instantiate an iframe on their page so that when you're looking at at a Google map on your page, you're actually looking at the Google map on the Google server through an iframe. There's a lot of tricky stuff that comes into play with iframes. Like, you can't necessarily modify the contents of an iframe because it's actually a separate web page. So if you're using JavaScript to do some fancy stuff on the page, you're not going to be able to affect the contents of that iframe. IMG, this is the image tag. Pretty straightforward. There's actually going to be some new developments in the image tag area, though. There's been a picture tag proposed. And basically, what that'll do is right now, as web developers, we're kind of stuck with this conundrum that we serve the same image to every type of device, whether it's a big screen TV or a tiny little mobile phone. And what we want as developers is a little more control over what goes where. So a picture element is actually, I believe how it's been proposed most recently, is there will be a picture tag, and inside of that we'll have multiple sources with different targets. So you might have, say, a 2x resolution for iPad, a tiny image for Nokia, a giant high resolution version for Google TV or whatever. Yeah?
How do the devices know the difference?
How do the devices know the difference? The devices don't know the difference. It's our job to tell them what they're getting. Right now, that's a little tricky. We as developers aren't necessarily getting all the information we need from these devices. That's getting better and better as browsers and devices get better. But that's actually, the picture element is one of those things to solve that type of problem. And
so the operating system of the device is going to look for the best.
Is it like a tripwire or something?
No. I'm not sure what you meant by that question.
Like a certain code that matches up with a certain program that's run on whatever device it is.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to explain it. Basically, your browser, your device, will send a header of information to the server saying, right now we have the ability to identify what kind of browser they're using, what their basic screen resolution is, and what the pixel density is of their device. With that information, we can use tricks on our side to kind of serve the right stuff, but not right up front, because we haven't had that response from the client saying this is what I'm sorry. We do have the response, but we don't have the ability to react to that header right away. So there's some changes being done to the elements to kind of give us a little more flexibility to deal with those multiple devices. That was not the best explanation. I'm gonna get back to that. I'm gonna figure out how to say that better next time. How about that? Input. Input is basically the basic form element. There's different types of inputs. There's inputs that have a text input. There's inputs for files. When you see a browse button, that's an input file. So inputs are pretty much the majority of the elements used within forms, with the exception of a few things like select lists are done a little bit differently. Insert, we talked about that. KBD. Wow, this one's completely new to me.
It's almost 7:20.
Almost 7:20. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I'm going to skip the ones that don't make any sense. Keygen, skipping. Label. Label is used for form elements, for field sets. Basically, when you have a checkbox on a page and you have a label next to it and you're able to click the text next to it and it clicks the checkbox, that's because there's been a label associated with that radio. LI is a list item. That's the generic bullet pointed list item. Link is similar to, you might think it's like an A tag, but it's actually closer to something. It's closer to a resource that you would put in the head. It's basically saying, I need the stuff that's in this file for this website. It's not necessarily saying you need to click here to go get this source. It's basically a way to include other information. Map isn't really used anymore. Not going to talk about that. Mark either. Menu is just very straightforward semantic, letting you know that there's a menu there. Meta tags. There's lots of different meta tags that allow you to do different things like refresh the page after a certain amount of time, add keywords. The one you're going to use the most, though, is title. And that's what sets this text right up here. Meter. We're going to skip this one. Nav is a semantic markup. No script. This is something you use when you have something on your site that uses JavaScript to interact with the page. You may want to provide some sort of fallback for people who aren't using JavaScript. It doesn't happen very often, but some people simply don't use JavaScript.
I'm afraid to download the upgrade.
Yeah, I guess. Object is very similar to the embed. It was a legacy. It was a legacy object, or I'm sorry, a legacy element that was basically a catch-all In fact, it was developed kind of as a competitor to Embed. Early on in the days of the web browsers, the different web companies would kind of come up with their own elements and standards, and then basically they'd try to see which one was better, and they'd fight for theirs. Instead of getting one that was better for both, we got both of them. So that kind of sucks. Ordered list, OL. Option group. This is for grouping different options within a select list. Within a select list, you have separate option tags. Output, that's simply a semantic thing. P is for paragraph. This is essentially what you wrap every paragraph on your page if it's straight text. Param was something for objects, so we're going to skip that. Pre essentially means that this text is pre-formatted, so I want to keep all the space that I include in it. And I'm going to demonstrate this very quickly. Where's our HTML down here? Okay, so let's say we have ASDF, space, ASDF. You'll notice up above, there's simply one space there. HTML will always collapse multiple spaces into one space, unless you do something like this. You'll notice up there, it now says, oh, this is pre-formatted, and it'll contain all those spaces. There's also a special Unicode character, non-breaking space. You can add that outside of a pre-tag to add multiple spaces to things. Anyway, it's getting off track there. Let's go back to our list. We're on 720. Oh my goodness. Progress. Progress is a new one that will allow us to show progress bars. The Q element was an early one for quote. Doesn't really get used that often. RP is essentially just for the Ruby language, so we're going to skip that. Same thing with RT and Ruby. S is for like strike through, no longer accurate or relevant. Sample is essentially a semantic markup tag. Script. Script is very important. Script is where you do all of your JavaScript work. It always goes in a script tag in your web page. Usually what it is a script with an href to a JavaScript file, but you can do inline JavaScript within the script tag. Section is simply for semantic layout. Select is what wraps all the options in a select list, like a dropdown. Small makes text small. Source is kind of like code. I'm sorry. Source is actually what's going to be used in the picture element that we talked about earlier. Span is similar to div, except that a span has no breaks either before or after it. A div will essentially break before and after it. It's what's called a block level element. It's a block of something. A span is something that's called an inline element, saying that it essentially flows in line with the text. If you were to do a paragraph of text and in the middle of that have a span with no styling on that span, you wouldn't even know that there was a span there because everything would just flow together. However, if it was a div, it would break everything up. Strong is just like bold. I would encourage you not to use strong and use B instead. Style is just like script, only for CSS. You can do style and link to a style sheet, or you can have a style tag and list your styles right there in line. Sub is for subscript, H2O. Summary is essentially a semantic. Sup is for superscript. Table, we talked about that. The only reason you use tables these days is to lay out tabular data, something you would find in a spreadsheet. It's pretty much considered taboo to use table for any sorts of layouts these days. T-body just describes where the body of the table is as opposed to the head. TD is a data cell, and essentially a table is a collection of cells. Text area, this is an input that has a text input that has multiple lines of text. So whenever you see the big text inputs, those are text areas as opposed to an input with a type of text. This specifies where a table footer is, a table header cell. This is marks where a table head is. Time. This is pretty straightforward. The reason we want to use that as opposed to just putting a time in text is that future programs may be able to use this, and it may hyperlink it to your calendar. So when you see a time, you could click on it and say create new event. Title is very straightforward. TR is a table row. Track is going to be for the media elements, essentially for things like closed captioning, where the closed captioning needs to be displayed along with the video at certain points. U is for underline. UL is for unordered list. These are for bullet points. var is pretty much just a semantic markup. Video is, let's see, what would video do? And then WBR is not something we really use. All right, kind of breeze through the rest of those kind of really quickly, but I wanted to kind of wrap up. So I gotta say that this class was a little more boring than the first class. So I really hope you watched the first video, and I really hope you stick with us for the next classes. What I plan to talk about next week is actually CSS, and that's where you really get into styling the web. I encourage you to come back for that. That one will actually be a lot more fun. But this is all stuff you kind of at least have to have in your head when you're going to be building web pages.